Hello, I'm Manvi Dhillon, and you're watching the Season 2 finale of DuPont Presents The Power of Shunya, Quest for Zero. Over the last 14 weeks, this series has explored ways in which science can be used to achieve maximum progress with zero negative impact. Innovations that ensure you can get fuel from waste. Technologies that eliminate crop waste and maximize yield. Nutrients that address the issue of malnourishment and widespread hunger throughout India. In keeping with India's legacy of knowledge and problem solving, we travel the length and breadth of the country to find 21st century Aryabhats, innovators who showed us how science can be tapped to achieve zero.
Innovation is the foundation of our progress. Science is the change agent.
Achieving zero communication barriers because of language, because of disability, that's a vision that I have.
Zero or Shunya for me is moving towards excellence. And in a way, this building has aptly achieved that because it's a net zero energy building.
Shunya to us is about achieving zero in hospital-acquired infections.
We'd actually be able to create an alternative biofuel where we have zero land use. We have zero usage of fresh water, either in irrigation or in the conversion process.
Today, we continue our celebration of these innovations and technologies as we explore what India has already achieved on its quest for zero and what India must still do to fully embrace the idea and the concept of Shunya. In the first half of this episode, we'll look at the most exciting innovations and technologies this season and ask, what role did science play in their success, and what must these innovations do to really stand up to India's most challenging problems? I'm joined by 6 expert panelists today. Here's a round of introductions. Gurcharan Das, internationally best-selling author and former CEO with Procter & Gamble India. Ajay Sood, professor at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Aditya Natraj, the founder of Kaivalya Education. Ravi Kailas, the founder of Mitra Energy. Balvinder Singh Kalsi, president of DuPont South Asia and ASEAN. And Dipankar Gupta, director at the Center for Public Affairs and Critical Theory, Shiv Nadar University. Thank you all for joining us very much. Let's begin. Last year, the Indian Space Research Organization succeeded in placing the Mangalyaan satellite into orbit around Mars, becoming the 4th mission ever to do so, and the first to succeed on its first attempt. And India spent only $74 million. That's a tenth of what the US spent on its Maven Mars mission. Some say that the key to India's success lies in a concept called jugaad, and I'm going to read the definition of jugaad, which is essentially a Hindi word meaning an improvised solution born from ingenuity and cleverness. Others describe it as the gutsy art of spotting opportunities in the most adverse circumstances and resourcefully improvising solutions using simple means. Gurcharan Das, what has this mission really taught us in terms of science, ingenuity, and our ability to solve large problems?
Well, we should be proud of Mangalyaan and what it has achieved. I just wish this was the norm rather than the exception. The Mangalyaan really does not reflect a culture of having created a culture of innovation in the country. I feel that to do that, you can't just work from the point of view of a public sector laboratory. All our companies should be investing in R&D, fighting in the market through better quality products.
Dipankar Gupta, how can we apply what we've learned from Mangalyaan to challenges that India faces all the time?
Well, I would like to second what Gurchan said about being proud of what we have achieved. I would also like to emphasize that this shows, amongst other things, that the public sector isn't all that bad. And that if they are asked to deliver and they get the right kind of leadership, they can do a great job. And I hope Mangalyaan will be an inspiration to other public sector enterprises. Another thing is that because we are late starters, there's a certain advantage in it. You don't waste all that money. If you're the first starter, you have to put in a lot of investment. But if you're a late starter, you can ride in the wake of what has happened already. And I think Mangalyaan is a great example of that.
You know, the moment we inserted the word jugaad into the conversation, there was bound to be a difference of opinion. But Mr. Sood, what is jugaad's relationship to high science, to Shunya, in your opinion?
What we should realize is from jugaad, we must move to science-led innovation, because that's where the future will be and the returns will be high.
On that note, let's begin our discussion today in right earnest, and we're going to focus on energy and the environment. Throughout the season, we have explored innovations that are creating energy from a variety of renewable sources like wind, sun, local agricultural produce, and even everyday waste. Ravi Kailas, do you think that the energy sector has really embraced the concept of Shunya? And if yes, then in what ways?
We are at a historic stage right now where, as Dipankar said, that we have the ability to ride in somebody else's way, to see what has happened when other people have made choices. The 19th century was about coal-based power. The last century was about nuclear power. But this century, we've got the benefit of seeing what has happened. I mean, if you see the UK is decommissioning 40 nuclear reactors, and it's costing $100 million to just decommission these. So if you add the cost of the life cycle of these assets, it is far more expensive than what anybody thought. But we are today at a stage where renewables is not only competitive with thermal on the margin or virtually any other sort of power on the margin, but we are at a stage where we can make the choice from the beginning itself. So we only have 250 gigawatts of total generating capacity today. The next 500 gigawatts could have a far more proportion of renewables than virtually any other country could do, because we have the benefit of hindsight of virtually every other country.
On that note, a great example of a renewable source of energy was carbon continuum's reactor technology, which was featured on the episode on climate management, which essentially converted emissions into carbon nanotubes. First, let's take a look at this technology.
The tire pyrolysis industry, these guys burn 3 tons of tire per every day, and during this process they emit 1 ton of gas. We collect those gas and convert them into CNTs.
Using our nanotechnological skills, we identified this process, and we thought this would be the best benefit to the environment, as we are not letting out any gases getting outside the atmosphere, which is the major cause of the climate change.
Well, Ajay Sood, it sounds almost too good to be true. You take a problem, you convert it into a solution. Is that what really happened here? Because you had this company, Carbon Continuum, take emissions and convert it into carbon nanotubes. Reflect on the potential here.
So this technology is taking carbon from the waste, like say from tires, which is one waste tires in fact, and convert into carbon nanotube. So there is no magic here. It's really very nice science which goes into it. You can use chemical vapor deposition, you can use other methods, and indeed you can get a very high-end product.
Well, apart from the work of Carbon Continuum, Mr. Kalsi, are you seeing enough science-led innovation in renewable energy?
Yes, if I take this example, I would like to see this example in 2 ways. The first being, we've taken a problem and actually converted it into a solution. And as Dr. Sood has said, carbon nanotubes have great properties. And not only you could use it in different areas, it could help in the composites area, which makes the vehicles or aircrafts lighter, which in turn leads to fuel efficiency and in turn contribute to the environment. But I'll also like to see this problem in a different way. Should the people who are using it could have applied different technology not to allow the emissions to happen in the first, and applied a different technology to be able to convert it to carbons.
On the show, we have addressed India's huge challenge of waste management. India is a country where waste is growing around tenfold over the last 10 years, and in the next 10 years, it's going to grow 2.5 times. By the end of the decade, India is expected to generate 180 million tons of waste per year. Many of our innovations this season, including C6 Energy or Bio-Orja for that matter, Ravi Kailas, looked at harnessing waste as a source of energy. Very quickly, reflect on the potential of generating energy from waste because it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Absolutely. I believe that we've not even started that journey in India. And this is, as you said, it does kill 2 birds with 1 stone. On one side, there is incentive to collect waste and make our cities and towns greener. And on the second side, you are generating power. And we are talking of gigawatts worth of power that can be generated. I mean, just imagine cities like Delhi or Hyderabad or Bangalore, where there is a more efficient way to dispose of city waste in very large landfills and create landfill gas. I've seen projects that generate over 2 gigawatts of landfill gas, and cities like this should be generating that. So I think it does kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
If I can add to what he said, actually we should be doing much more for the energy sector than we are doing. In my view, it's really not doing enough justice. And if necessary, I think we have something like Atomic Energy Commission, Space Commission. We should have Energy Commission. There is only then the best brains will come and challenge them.
On that note, we're going to take a very quick break. On the other side of this break, we'll explore the other ways that India is looking to ensure safety of its people. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the season finale of DuPont Presents The Power of Shunya, Quest for Zero. I'd like to shift gears to discuss safety, things like healthcare, safety at the workplace, drinking water, sanitation, various other endeavors to keep India's people safe. Dr. Devi Shetty, Chairman and founder of Narayana Health, joins us at this stage. Dr. Shetty, thank you very much for joining us on the show. But first, I'm going to address a question to Dipankar Gupta. Do you think that in India we're really embracing the concept of Shunya when it comes to safety? Is India thinking about safety per se?
Far from it. We're not thinking of safety because somehow we feel that the dangerous work is being done by somebody else, and that we are protecting ourselves with high walls and our own generator and our own RO purifier and the rest of it. Safety will only become a concern at the societal level if we first and foremost think of citizenship, where everybody counts, and that is something we are quite a ways from. The second thing about safety, as I've noticed, it's not enough to tell people that you must wear a mask when you, say, spray pesticides. You have to have an overload of information. At the end of the day, however, with safe water, safe air, and safe environment, it really depends upon how we look at other people and do we see them just as we see ourselves. And that is the core of citizenship.
That's an important thought, but I also want to focus on safety from the healthcare prism. In the episode on healthcare, we introduced all our viewers to 2 innovations that tackle some of India's biggest challenges in the world of healthcare. A virtual liver that was developed by Strand Life Sciences and a low-cost hemoglobin measurement tool. Let's take a look.
The virtual liver is a computer system that mimics the functioning of the liver on a computer. It flags what are the molecules or drugs that are likely to have liver-related problems, at what doses could those problems be there, and are there particular individuals who are more susceptible to it.
just not about making the anemia shunya, it's also about making the inefficiencies of the country shunya.
Dr. Shetty, I'd like to come to you. What role do you think that science can play in finding a solution to India's healthcare issues? That is a very broad, overarching question that I'm putting to you.
The technology will help India to become the first country in the world to dissociate healthcare from affluence. We will be able to prove to the world that the wealth of the nation has very little to do with the quality of healthcare citizens can enjoy. And the next big thing what's going to happen in healthcare is not going to be a magic pill or a faster scanner or a new operation. It is going to be IT which will become the platform on which healthcare is delivered. Within the next 5 to 7 years, patients may not have to visit the hospital for a regular outpatient visit. Patient will sit at home and doctors will be online, and all these innovations can only happen in India, predominantly because we have brilliant software engineers.
Dr. Shetty, India's vulnerability to genetic and chronic diseases, it's well acknowledged. So the fact that there is actually very minimal access to timely diagnosis and treatment, is that a ticking time bomb for our country?
Yes, you are right. We are going to, or we are facing an epidemic of heart disease. We are already facing an epidemic of diabetes, and virtually a large number of still lurking infectious diseases. We are going to face a major crisis from all these chronic diseases. Now, for us to have a process of early detection, we need to invest on training more medical specialists. So essentially, we are in a phenomenal position to change the way every piece of healthcare is expected to function.
And I'm going to change gears just a little bit to another very important sector, which is education. It's critical to any conversation about safety and protection of our people. Yet, as you know, Aditya Natraj, almost half of Indian pupils drop out of school by the age of 13. 1 in 10 people have received any form of job training. Here's how Shugata Mitra defined literacy in India in our episode on education.
Shogata Mitra is the brain behind School in the Cloud, set up in Chandrakona in West Bengal. It operates on a unique model of introducing children in remote villages to minimally invasive education.
Zero illiteracy in this country means the ability of everybody to be able to write their names on a piece of paper. I don't think that's an important ability anymore, so maybe the idea itself is obsolete. Would we rather have children who can write their names in ink on a piece of paper, or would we rather have children who can search the internet and find out things for themselves?
Aditya Natraj, how should we define literacy in India in 2014? And, you know, how have we been defining it, say, over the last 5 years?
Well, so far, when you go by the census, literacy is merely saying, can you sign your name? This is really an extremely low definition which might have been applicable maybe 30, 40 years ago, because that's all the aspiration of the country was. But today, if you see how it's being defined across the world, literacy in terms of reading and writing is merely one form of literacy. I should be able to read my mother tongue in order to be able to interact with the economy, read instructions on a manual, read a government permission form, read my birth certificate. But really there are 3, 4 other forms of literacy. One is civic literacy. Do I know my rights as a citizen? Do I know how to ensure my rights are given? Do I know what happens when I go into a police station? 2, there's financial literacy. Do I know what happens when I get a loan at 10% rather than 18%? Do I know what is simple interest versus compound interest? Do I know whether a recurring deposit is better or fixed deposit is better? We're introducing many financial instruments with no literacy of how to use these instruments, right? And finally, technological literacy. Can you even imagine these children 20 years from now not needing to interact with computers? It's almost impossible to imagine a future like that. And that creates such a divide. People talk about, if I don't know English, I feel inadequate. If you don't know technology, you should feel how inadequate you are. So unless we expand the definition of literacy to include civic literacy, financial literacy, and technological literacy, I don't think we're really measuring anything.
You've expanded the definition of literacy to include all these three. Are we doing enough to actually address the literacy gap then in the wider sense of the term?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. One is to look at it as the glass is half empty, or the other way is to look at it as the glass is half full. I think on the half full count, I'm really excited about what has happened in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, there were 87 million children in India out of school. Let me just say that again, 87 million. We've reduced that to probably less than 2 million now. As a result of a massive expansion in number of schools, number of teachers, we've probably had the biggest expansion of a school system in the history of the world. However, I think now is when the grunge work is going to start, because we've sort of put the teachers and the students and everyone together. We've got children admitted to schools, but actually getting quality education, making sure these different forms of literacy are absorbed by children is a much tougher task. It's going to now be involving, a lot more. Now you're going to need some serious science and engineering to see why are children of first generation literates not learning fast enough.
Well, I'm going to very swiftly change gears from education to how we keep our population fed, i.e. agriculture, food security. This season, we've explored counterfeit pesticides, innovative hybrid seeds, mobile applications for farmers, the importance of crop diversification, and even remotely piloted aircrafts for investigating biological samples from farmers. Let's take a look.
This is a 3D technology eyes-on sticker, and it has around DuPont oval 10 dots arranged in a specific sequence, which farmers can identify with. This has a unique identification number, which then they can send it to the on SMS to our call center, which replies back to them, conveying whether it is a genuine product or it's a spurious or counterfeit product.
27P31 can take good amount of water stress both ways, when it is less as well as when it is excess. We have seen that farmer earns around 5,000 rupees per acre more in case he grows a hybrid or 27P31.
It helps you to connect, create an ecosystem where the farmer, the people who are trying to interact with the farmers, with the seed companies or contract farming companies, as well as the management, to keep in the loop, real time, what is the farmer issues, what he's trying to grow, when is the harvest.
We can fly the aircraft in the nearby fields, and we can collect the air samples at that particular area, and from the infection of these samples we can tell it what particular biota is present in that particular area. So on basis of that we can just make results like what kind of pesticides we should use, or what kind of preventive measures that we should take to prevent the infection from these biotas.
Well, we know that India's climate is changing. We've experienced it with erratic droughts, erratic rain. But Mr. Kalsi, how good a job are we doing at working with the changing climate and yet aiming for a higher crop yield?
So we're facing issues from two fronts. The first being, the arable land is not going up. We have the same virtual land where we have to grow more. On the other side, we have a growing population to feed. And as the middle class continues to grow, the disposable incomes continue to increase, people wanting not only more quantity food, but more nutritious food. So the only alternate available to us is to create virtual acres, which means we need to produce much more from the same acres that are available. And so I think science has a big role to play here. How do we bring seeds to our farmers which are high yielding, can produce 20%, 30% more from the same output? How do we empower them with crop chemicals which are safe to the environment, low use rate, very targeted to the pest? And also focus on agronomy practices. How do we teach them about intercropping? How do we teach them about sowing practices? Bring in modern technologies in terms of either sowing, mechanical sowing, or mechanical harvesting. And also making sure that the farmer has the access to the right inputs, right seeds, right pesticides. And of course, last is to create those linkages between the farmers and the end markets.
In one simple word, yes or no, are we doing enough?
I think there's a great amount of effort going up, but we can continue to bring more and more technology to our agriculture farmers.
But we must also stop the fears that surround this area and look to science. I mean, there's a lot of religious kind of fear making in the whole area connected with genetically modified crops, for example. We've just stopped the testing even. And Norman Borlaug, a great scientist, was horrified that India was doing something like
So keep the fears in check. On that note, so far we've looked back at some of the ingenious innovations introduced this season. After the break, we're going to look forward. How do we encourage a broader adoption of science and technology? How will Shunya go from a concept to a reality? Stay tuned as our audience and our expert panel looks to the future. At this stage, I'd like to thank Dr. Devi Shetty for joining us. We're back in a moment. You're watching DuPont Presents The Part of Shunya, Quest for Zero. Welcome back to the finale of Season 2 of DuPont Presents The Part of Shunya, Quest for Zero. We were introduced to some truly miraculous innovations this season. Given that they now exist, are all of India's problems solved? Why not? How must we improve upon in the future? How does Shunya go from being an interesting concept to a reality for India and potentially the world? First, let's listen to how Sunita Narayan applied the principle of Shunya in our episode on pollution.
Today, if at all, we are adopting such a capital resource-intensive system that it creates inequity and it creates waste. And then we spend all our lives chasing that waste, trying to clean up, but we can never clean it up.
Shunya at the starting point. That's what you're saying. Put that goal of
Absolutely.
Shunya before you take the first step in building your home, in building your office, in building your factory, in conducting any activity.
Very well put. Shunya at the beginning, at the heart of it. Not Shunya after, as an afterthought. But Shunya is the power which allows you to reinvent so that you can absolutely think differently. I keep saying, we talk about thinking outside the box, think without a box. Think Shunya.
Dipankar Gupta, extend that idea. How can more individuals think of Shunya as the starting point rather than the end point? How can India change the way it approaches the idea of Shunya?
You just heard Dr. Devi Shetty say, after he spoke about the technical aspects, the most important thing was political will. And I have to reiterate that again at this point, because we're not looking at individuals doing something extraordinary and then that lapsing into nothingness. We have to collectively produce something. As you know, no science, no commerce, nothing happens on an individual basis alone. So you have to think of ways and means of rewarding people who do science, investing in science, and giving science the kind of lift that this country has not received for many, many years, perhaps centuries. It's time we did that.
I want to, Gurcharan Das, get a sense from you on what the term environmental integrity means in the Indian context. Does India have environmental integrity at all? And, you know, can you apply, again, a Shunya goal in the context of environmental integrity?
Well, certainly. I think that Shunya is really a mindset, as Dipankar has said, as Devi Shetty has said. But Jugaad is also that mindset, that confidence that a person has to tackle a difficult problem. Now, there are ways to tackle difficult problems. Some are small, individual, which you can get around. Others require teams to do it. But ultimately, it is the confidence. And I think that's for me, the big thing of the last 2 decades of India is that we have created a generation of youngsters who have a sense of confidence which their parents did not have.
As we learned from Rajendra Pachori in the episode on climate management, the Hindu philosophy of Vasudeva Kutumbakam means the whole universe is one family. Let's take a look.
climate change is essentially a collective problem. I mean, it faces all living species on this planet. So while, of course, you need action at the level of the community, at the level of towns and cities, sub-national levels, national levels, and the international levels, ultimately it's the individual who has to start taking this problem seriously. In a democracy, fortunately, if all the members of society realize that something needs to be done, then our leaders will also act. And therefore, I would submit that perhaps the most important contribution we can make to meeting this challenge and solving this problem is to create awareness on the reality and the truth underlying climate change.
How do we create awareness? I mean, a program like this one, which is the part of Shunya Quest for Zero, is trying to create awareness. Where does the responsibility for creating awareness lie?
Well, first, you're doing what you can, and it's very important that other organizations should also pitch in. There's no doubt about it. But in education, you listed many kinds of literacy. The more kinds of literacy you introduce, the greater seems to be our extent of illiteracy. You know, that's the sad part. So, in order to get awareness on this subject, it can only be done by the state. The state must reward, must propagate, must encourage quality education at every level.
You know, we've talked in this season about how you can produce energy from wind, from solar. There are many, many alternative sources of energy. What should India be doing to, increase this quest for energy from renewables?
So first of all, I think we're already making great progress when it comes to wind energy, and we're making great progress on solar energy. I think the issue till now was getting it to grid parity. And we are now coming to a stage where the cost of solar is closer to grid parity. And this is one perfect example where you can start with zero as a concept. Right? And we should not be looking at these renewable energies just to increase our energy basket, but it also gives the opportunity to get power to far-flung areas where we cannot reach and don't have to put big, large power plants.
Access. What can we do to make renewable energy more accessible, less expensive? This is an area that you understand very well, Ravi Kailas.
And I don't think we are in a stage where renewables are going to provide power to the masses for everybody right now. It may be a goal in 20 years or 30 years. We may reverse course before others, but I don't think we should kid ourselves that it is going to be the source of power for everybody. But I do believe that renewables provides access, solar for example, in microgrids or in villages, etc., where we were able to connect. I saw in one of your programs that in DuPont that you got this project in Leh or in Ladakh, where you have access to power right there, where in fact it's very difficult to take the grid out there, but you can create a whole power solution there. So I do think that we need to balance these factors.
Well, on that note, it's time for a very quick break. Dipankar Gupta, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Appreciate your insights and your time. Gurcharan Das, thank you very much for joining us. Always great to have you on the part of Shunya Quest for Zero. As our efforts to keep the environment safe continue to move forward, so do our efforts for keeping India's growing population safe. After the break, we look ahead to what must be done to improve safety in our daily lives at home, at work, and abroad. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the season finale of DuPont Presents The Part of Shunya Quest for Zero. Nearly 16 million people will be born this year. As our life expectancy and overall population continues to grow, by the year 2030, India will overtake China as the world's most populous country. I come back to education because I think that that is the basic plank that will determine India's future. In 2014, bear with me as I go through these statistics, India's expenditure on education as a percentage of total government expenditure was quite low, 11.3%. So that's really behind the curve of countries like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, and Thailand. Ajay Sood, what must India do to reprioritize education spending, and how do we work together, maybe public and private, to make this budget mean more?
Absolutely. I think we cannot do just based on the government resources and expect that everything will be solved. That's just not possible looking at the numbers. So I think in education, when we say it's also the quality of education we should be looking at. So in one thing which I think India is very good, but we have not really encashed, is to marry education with this information technology to make education a fun. And in your program, you showed hole in the wall experiment, which is obviously a great success. But we have to really do it as a standard item, not really in few schools and colleges.
Interplay of technology with education with the goal of making it more fun, more accessible, more exciting. I'm going to talk about the shortage of schools, classrooms, and teachers. The resource shortage is well documented, well known. 1.4 million Indian children between the ages of 6 to 11 aren't in school or they've dropped out of school. How do we, Aditya Natraj, essentially just fortify our educational base?
I think there are two separate questions here. One is, what do you do for the last 1.4 million children? Now, yes, that seems like a very large number, but you have to remember that there are 240 million children in school. So as a percentage of that, this is rather small. These are the really sticky children. These are child labor. These are extremely difficult in cotton farms in Andhra. These are in far-flung areas in the Himalayas where the habitations are too small. But really, I would prefer to focus the resources instead. I mean, sort of there's a general consensus now to focus instead on improving the quality for the 240 million who are going to school. And in that, in order to improve it, I think actually very small investments of probably 5% more or 10% more from where we are going will probably cause a 50% improvement if it's really targeted.
I'm going to change gears to talk about agricultural production. Professor Yugendra Alag, in the episode on agricultural production, said, for the Indian farmer to succeed, you must have the Indian farmer linking up very well and strongly with producer groups. Let's take a look.
You have to link up with producers groups. You have to link up with cooperatives. You have to link up with companies which are willing to take a creative stance on this. The point is, we need to build up systems which build up collaboration with the private sector at home, with the private sector abroad, but we need to drive it.
Mr. Kalsi, Professor Alag makes it sound like the whole process starts with the farmer. I could also argue that you need to actually bring the science and technology to the farmer, so the process starts outside of the farmer. Reflect on that.
So it's both. Yes, ultimately it's about the farmer, but we have to bring new technologies and new thinking to the farmer. And we are a country of very small farm holdings. You know, it's unlike the other developed markets where you have hundreds of acres. Our average land holdings are somewhere in the 2 to 3 acres overall for the country. And we got to think how we apply science and more innovative models to our environment. And the future going forward is going to be around cooperative farming, around contract farming, and I think that's what Dr. Alag is referring to. How do you tie up with contract farming, with the private sector, with the companies? And how do we bring in concepts like precision farming, which generally applies to much larger land holdings, to our environment of small?
I'm going to look at the related aspect of farming in India, and that is, to address the problem of hunger, and hunger from a larger point of view of adequate nutrition as well. What must we be doing right now to make sure that all the sectors are working in tandem to address India's complex nutritional problems?
So if you look at it, we have a lot of protein deficiency in our country. The question is, should we have a protein revolution in our country? Should we bring in new forms of protein? For our poorer people, the dependence is more on lentils, on dal that we eat. How do we bring in soy into the overall scheme of things, which is very high on protein? And then basically reflect back on what are the issues with regard to the diet. So either we have undernutrition, where people are not getting sufficient or more nutritious food, and on the other side is overnutrition, where because of lifestyle we have the other disease. So how do we bring in balanced diet to those people?
Nothing can stop this hunger and so on unless we bring biotechnology. It was said earlier, we don't have enough land, we don't have enough water. But at the end of the cycle, if the product is not accepted by the society, I think it's a huge waste. So we should reflect, the Shunya should include also
the societal acceptance angle of it
in totality.
We have time for a few questions from the audience. Each audience member that has a question to raise their hand, go ahead and direct it perhaps to a specific member of the panel. Please go ahead.
So my question is on basis of energy resources. So it will be obviously to you. So determined processes are being taken so that energy reaches all the poor and marginal villages that are dark in India in the next 5 years in a very reasonable rate. And for that, India is using various energy sources like solar energy, wind energy, and hydro energy. So, sir, according to you, will it be possible to solve this issue to bring a brighter India in those dark parts of the country?
We have a corollary which was in the telecom revolution for the last 20 years. It was almost unthinkable that we could add 850 mobile phones in 15 or 20 years. And technology allows us to do something like that if you're talking about solar energy or local grids, etc. I don't think we will be able to deliver in 5 years, but I do believe that over the next 20 years or so, we would be able to see a technology-driven and technology-led solutions coming to every part of India.
Okay, we're going to take another question from the audience. We have a mic.
I have a generic question for the panel. India has had a dubious record when it comes to industrial safety. So can innovation change this? What are your thoughts on this?
So let me start saying I think there is a much greater growing awareness around industrial safety. And we see as Indian companies now have global ambitions, I think they see this as a competitive advantage. And it's not staying only at the large global companies, it's percolating down even to the mid and small size companies because they see themselves as a sourcing point for some of the large multinationals. So they want to upgrade their industrial safety standards. And just to share with you, we at DuPont, for us, safety is one of our core values, right, which we implement across the world. And since we have been so strong at safety, we now have a safety program which we go out and help large companies change their safety cultures.
As India moves forward, so too does its need for science, for innovation, and for collaboration amongst the country's brightest minds. We're very fortunate to have had some of them on the panel today. Thank you all very much for being here. This series is as much a celebration of our accomplishments in reaching Shunya as it is a reminder that we must continue to move forward, forging a path towards zero hunger, zero pollution, zero waste, and much more. As India moves forward, so too does its need for science, innovation, and collaboration. Thank you all to those who have tuned in to their second season of DuPont Presents The Power of Shunya Quest for Zero. For more video and information on our progress towards Shunya, be sure to visit us at www.powerofshunya.com and on our Facebook and Twitter pages. This is Manvi Dhillon signing off. Goodbye.